Joe, you was supposed to be living your best gay life, marching in the streets with the vulva hat on. Hey nerds, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another episode of Rouge, the series on my channel where I simultaneously put on my makeup and do a book review. And on this episode we have Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. This book is very interesting. I really like this one. But before we get into that, I just want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Now let's get into this. Mrs. Everything is actually one of the books from my past Half Price Books haul. I think it was one of the last ones listed. And I told y'all how excited I was to read this because this story, I could tell from the book jacket, was just about women empowerment, and that's something that I think is very important. So this story follows two main characters, Joe and Bethy Kaufman. They are sisters. The sisters grow up in the 1950s and they are witnessing the changes in the world in real time. And both Joe and Bethy experience their own trauma and differences. And throughout the story, we see both sisters grow and take different paths. It's a tale of sisterhood, self-worth, self-growth, and rebirth. Before we get into the plot, trigger warning, heavy trigger warning. I'm warning you right now. This book has a lot of graphic and inappropriate stuff in it. So if you are triggered by the following, please click off this video. So before we jump into the plot completely, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the characters, the ones that we're going to be seeing the most. So first we have Joe. She's the oldest sister. This is our masked lesbian feminist. Joe is very ambitious and forward thinking. She is a book smart and street smart rebel who is ready to take on the world. And she wants so much to break through the patriarchal chains of society. Then we have her younger sister, Bethy, who is the good girl next door, goody two shoes, Miss Perfect Princess, okay? She really values her beauty and she dreams of becoming a star. And we learn very early on that Bethy will be satisfied with the traditional life in terms of being a woman. Then we have Sarah Kaufman, who is the girl's mother. Now I'm going to be interchangeably calling her Sarah and mom, or the mom, their mom, but just know that Sarah is Joe and Bethy's mom. She's a very stern, very strong matriarch. She favors Bethy over Joe. We see that like from the get-go, from when we first, start reading the book, because Bethy is the perfect daughter. And she's very hard on Joe because she resents her. She resents the fact that she's not like Bethy. Sarah is also the daughter to two parents who are Jewish immigrants. And she wants nothing more than to be the perfect, clean-cut American family. Then there's Ken Kaufman, Joe and Bethy's father. He's the very jovial, supportive husband and father. He only wants the absolute best for his family. And I would say he is the more optimistic parent in terms of Sarah being the way she is. That's all the characters that I will highlight for right now because there are so many side characters that come into the girls' lives, and we're gonna be here all day if I went through every single character. But let's get started into this plot. Hi, before we jump into this video, I just want to give y'all a quick disclaimer. So I have not done a full face of makeup since my last read in Rouge, and that was almost 2 months ago. So you will see me take off and reapply my makeup multiple times in this video because clearly I am out of practice and clearly I just cannot get it right. So this video with my makeup look for this one is definitely a trust the process situation. With that being said, enjoy the video. So we begin with the prologue, and the year is 2015. Jo is leaving the movie theater with her family when she gets a call. It's her doctor, and she is telling Jo that the cancer has returned. And she had it for the first time about 9 years prior to this. So as Jo's world completely turns upside down, she starts to remember some very key moments in her upbringing. And the last thing that crosses her mind is her sister, Bethy. All right, this is the beginning of part 1, and we're gonna start with Jo's POV. The year is now 1950. So we have the Kaufman family standing in front of their brand new home in a brand new neighborhood. Her parents, Sarah and Ken, really want to start anew as the perfect American family. Jo is currently 6 years old, almost 7, and Bethy is 5. This looks absolutely insane. I don't care. From the very beginning, Jo tells us that she thinks her mother does not like her. Jo knew who she was from a very young age, okay? This little girl wants to wear dungarees instead of matching dresses with her baby sister. And her mother would passive aggressively try to get her to, you know, force her to fit her ideal image of what a daughter should be. Mind you, this is the 1950s, so Sarah has a very traditional view of how little girls should be dressing, you know. So Ken, the dad, wants to take a family photo in front of their new house. Trying to catch up, Jo runs, trips, falls, and there's a tear in her dress now. Her mama scolds her immediately as if it was her fault, as if she tripped and fell on purpose. No worries though, because Jo's dad swoops in and saves her. But you know what her mom says? You know what her own mother says? She goes, "Sure, because you always take up for her." Like, yeah, because it's very obvious that you hate your own daughter. In this first chapter, the relationships are clearly established. Jo is Ken's favorite, and Bethy is Sarah's favorite. And because Jo is literally a child, she blames herself for not being good. Next chapter is Bethy's point of view, and we're diving into her little setup, her exposition. And she's telling us what she's doing in her day-to-day. While Jo is at school, she is helping her mom at home with housework. They're taking trips to the supermarket, they're folding laundry together. She's watching Sarah cook. So Bethy, being a child and impressionable, she's watching her mother do these things every day. And this has instilled within Bethy that this is what a good mother and wife does. This is what a good mother and wife is supposed to do. And she's telling us how much she cannot wait to be just like her mommy. And Bethy is put on a pedestal at a very young age by Sarah, being the perfect daughter. I'm gonna keep saying this because it is just hammered in that Bethy is the perfect daughter, you know, air quotes. Very girly, dainty, polite. And naturally, this primes Bethy to assume the role of letting people dote on her constantly. And it's in this chapter that we learn that the Kaufmans have a maid named May. I'm sure you put 2 and 2 together and realize that May is a black woman. And Bethy says that her mommy calls her the girl, despite May being a grown-ass woman. And we know this is a microaggression from that time period to belittle us, so yeah. And May, the maid, has a daughter that is Jo's age, and her name is Frida. Jo and Frida are best friends. They love to be rowdy with one another and play outside. And Sarah would never let Bethy join them. She wanted to keep her as dainty as possible, okay? Bethy then tells us about her grandparents, her Bubby and her Zadie. And through the mouth of this child, she explains to us that her grandparents are immigrants who came to America to give her mommy a better life. She also shares that her family has experienced racism and prejudice due to them being Jewish. Finally, 5-year-old Bethy gives us a glimpse into her relationship with Jo. Jo always protected her, loved on her, and every night at bedtime, Jo would tell her a bedtime story. Usually about a beautiful princess named Bethy that went on adventures. That was their little thing. That's how they bond. Jo is the protector. She is the standard big sister, and she would always end the night, end their day with a bedtime story about Princess Bethy. So that's sweet. I think that's so sweet. I think it's time for me to switch foundation shades because this Alright, here is a little ashy. Alright, next chapter, we're back in Joe's POV. And this chapter starts with Sarah chasing after a very upset Joe. Joe is fed up with her mama and she starts packing her bags, girl. I'm running away and I'm never coming back. Basically, this is what Joe is doing. And she's like about 7 or 8 at this part in the story. So Joe takes all that her little bags can gather and she dips out the window, booking it down the street. And we find out that Joe is running away to go live with May. Yes, their housemaid. And after 4 blocks of her running away from the house, her dad pulls up on her and is like, hey, like seeing you here. You want to go to a ball game with me? Like she's not running away from home or some shit. Hella cool, not upset at all. Dad for sure. So Kim takes Joe to a baseball game and it happens that her favorite team is playing and stuff. And you know, in the middle of the game, he finally asks Joe, what happened? Why are you so upset? Why you want to run away? Like what's going on? So Joe tells her dad that she came home to find a new maid in the kitchen. Joe asks her mom, like, okay, where are Frida and May? Why are they not here? Who is this stranger? And this is where we find out Sarah has replaced. She has fired May. And this really hurts little Joe because she loved May and she loved Frida even more. That was her best little friend. And when she asked her mother why, you know, why she let them leave, she said birds of a feather must flock together. Basically telling her daughter that she is pro-segregation and racist as fuck. Cause what? Who? Bye. And as young as Joe is, she knows that her mama is in the wrong. And before she, you know, ran down the hall and started packing her bags, Joe got into a screaming match with her mama and then she ended up getting slapped across the face. She's like I said, she's like 7 or 8 at this point. She's a child, not you slapping your child across the face like that. And Joe's telling us in her inner monologue, like no matter what she does and no matter how hard she tries, she just can't seem to satisfy her mom. Because she's always being criticized by her. The way that she sits, the way that she ate. Even if she breathed a certain way, Sarah had to make a comment about it. Sarah, being not a totally good mom, she would try to pit Ken against his own daughter and make him spank her for being defiant. Ma'am, there's a lot of things wrong like with that by itself. I'm not gonna get into it. And from how Joe tells it, you can tell he didn't want to do that. Always afterwards he would ask her, are you okay? Like he didn't want to do that to his daughter. He didn't want to do that. And Joe finally opens up to her dad and she's like, I think mom hates me because like I can't do nothing right when it comes to her. And of course her dad reassures her like a good parent should. Yeah. Alright, next chapter, and it's Bethy's POV again. Bethy's 11 now, and honey, she is coming into herself, okay? She envisions herself to be a star. Like, she thinks she is going to be the biggest star that ever graced the planet. Remember how I said Sarah practically primed her to be, like, a pageant queen? Bethy is starting to embody that much more now. And I want to say this before we get any further. Bethy is the prime example of pretty privilege. Her teachers are just like gushing over her, and so is everybody else in the neighborhood. Like they just love little Betty. They think she is perfect. My makeup looks rough as hell right now. Do I look ashy? I think I look ashy. Like something is not right. Hi, it's me again. So I thought I was recording for this chapter about Bethy. I was not. So left that out. I am so sorry. But it wasn't anything important, so y'all not missing much. Okay, back to the video. Alright, next chapter, and we're back in Joe's POV. She's in high school now, and she's best friend with a girl named Lynette Bobeck. Lynette is what black mothers would call fast. Enough said. And she is telling Joe all the gory details about her first BJ. And Lynette is described as short and busty with curly blonde hair. Joe's inner monologue is telling us how different she is from other girls at her school. The other girls are shorter, around average height, already developing into their bodies, and you know, they're all boy crazy, chasing after little stanky ass teenagers. Joe is much taller. She's not as curvaceous. She's more angular, skinnier. I would like to say she's statuesque, but and her other friends consisted of her basketball teammates, specifically a pair of twins who are black. What are their names? LaDrea and LaDonna. I'm sorry. Those are very stereotypical black names. Like the like in front of, they could have just been Drea and Donna. Interesting names from the author, but I'm gonna move on. And being friends with LaDrea and LaDonna gives Joe an insight on what they go through as black people, especially during the segregation period. You know that trend where it's like, what radicalized you as a kid? And Joe's answer to that would be, my mom fired our black housekeeper. Joe is our outspoken liberal white woman, okay? She started going to picket protests with the twins every Saturday to do her part, as she should. She also did it to rebel against her mother, the undercover racist. And Joe tells us that she actually has a little crush on Lynette. And she would be sorely reminded of reality when Lynette would talk about her boyfriend and her escapade with whichever boy she was dating at the time. Now, Joe tried. She tried to date a couple of boys, but it just wasn't for her. That and the fact that teenage boys never know what the hell they're doing. And being that Joe is so in tune with her sexuality, she decides to help Joe, okay? So Joe goes over to Lynette's house. That's so much better. Yeah, it's time for the darker foundation. I forgot the sun was out. That is so much better. Look at that. So Joe goes over to Lynette's house so Lynette can show her her brand new vibrator. And this is not just any vibrator. This is a vibrator that she is sharing with other girls from camp. This is how it goes. So one girl will have her time with the zzz, right? And she'll mail it to the next girl so they can have a turn. That is an infection of the worst kind waiting to happen. Like, ew! And you know what happens next? Lynette uses the zzz on Joe. I am very close with my best friend, but bitch, we ain't that close. And then Joe turned around and used it on Lynette. This part had me gagged. I had no words. All right, next chapter, thank God. It's Bethy's POV. She comes home from a night out with her friends, and the house she notices is super very quiet. And Sarah's like, you know, try to keep it down. Your father isn't feeling well. He's got an upset tummy. He's in the bathroom, so let's keep it shh. So Bethy goes to check on her dad, but she doesn't get an answer. So when he doesn't answer her, you know, Joe and Sarah try, you know, calling for him, and he doesn't answer still. So they open the bathroom to find Ken dead, sitting up on the toilet. And of course, they're all taking it very hard, but Sarah is taking it the hardest. Then we flash forward to the Shiva. Is it Shiva or is it Shiva? Shiva. Jewish subscribers, if I have any, help me out. If you don't know what, I'm gonna say Shiva. I think that's the best pronunciation. I've never heard this word in my life, so please bear with me. So Shiva is a Jewish practice that is a 7-day period of mourning following the death of a loved one. They're Jewish, remember that? This whole family is Jewish. And all of their family is lending a helping hand, including the girl's uncle, Uncle Mel. My eyebrows are hideous, oh my God. Uncle Mel was Ken's brother. So Bethy goes into a separate room to collect herself. She's trying her best. Her daddy is dead. Look, she's doing her best now. And then Uncle Mel finds her in a room, you know, and they're crying together for a little bit. And she's seen that he had been taking it hard, so she goes to hug her uncle, you know, only for him to grope her on the behind and leave as if nothing happened. Bethy decided in that moment, okay, maybe he's drunk and he didn't mean to do that, so I'm gonna let it go. Later that day, when everyone was packing up to go home, Bethy ran into Uncle Mel once again, and they hugged again, and this time Uncle Mel touched her breast, and she knew that that was not a damn accident. Bethy knew that was on purpose, and she ran away, as she should, because what the hell. Bethy was about to tell her mom what had happened, but her mom kind of did to give her the chance. She says, you know what, I'm gonna be working. I'm gonna start working so we can support ourselves, and I need y'all to like pick up y'all's slack, help me out. And then she told Bethy that she got a job for her. She's going to be helping out Uncle Mel and her Aunt Shirley around the house so she can collect and stack her own money. And she knew her mom was having a hard time, so she decided to grin and bear it and, you know, help out any way she can. So she goes to Uncle Mel and Aunt Shirley's house and she does her job, and Uncle Mel decides to give her a ride back home. And that day, when Uncle Mel gave her a ride, he did it again. And this would start a chain of events where he would do it every single time. And when I tell y'all, I had to fight the urge to not cry and throw up. To cope with what was happening to her, Bethy starts binge eating. in order to fill the void. It's already enough that she lost her dad and now she has to deal with this. Because of her binge eating, she began to gain a little weight, and it didn't help when her mother noticed and like started commenting on her weight. Like, that doesn't make anything better. Bethy finally drums up the courage to tell Jo what's been going on, and she tells her what Uncle Mel has been doing to her. And Jo's been gone, mind you, this whole summer because she got a job at a summer camp, so she wasn't around, so she didn't know this was happening. Jo said, oh hell no, don't worry about it, we gonna fix this. So the girls go over to Mel's house and they blackmail him, as they should, as they absolutely should, because what the heliante? They said, give us X amount of money or we're gonna go to the board of your job and have you ruined. Big claps to the Kaufman girls, because yes, this is what we need. Big ups to Jo for not playing about her baby sister, okay? And big ups to Bethy for fighting back. I applaud you. And to put the icing on the cake, on the way out, Bethy stole something very expensive on the way out of their house. Alright, next chapter, and we're back to Jo. And I know you can kind of see this, but this book has, the progression of it is very fast, and I'm telling you right now, it is not going to slow down. We still got lots of chapters left, okay? So we're back to Jo, and it is her senior year, and she tells us that she basically spent all summer with Lynette. She even told Lynette that she loved her, and Lynette sent it back. And as soon as school started back up, Lynette started dating a boy named Bobby. And Jo fantasizes about having a life with Lynette, but her and Lynette want very different things out of life. We learn Jo wants to go to college, become a writer, go to New York to pursue her dreams and her career. Lynette wants to be a housewife and a stay-at-home mom with lots of babies and lots of money. Isn't that the beauty of being a feminist? You get to choose what you want to do. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those girls' choices. That's just, they want very different things, you see. And at one point, Jo even gets jealous of Bobby and Lynette's relationship. And Lynette notices that she's getting jealous, and she's like, listen, you need to calm all that down, because there are now rumors going around school that we're lesbians. And Lynette is deeply in denial. She's like, I do love you, but not in that way. It's different. And she had the nerve to say to Jo, you're just butch. That's your style. First, you have the nerve to say that I'm butch, and you have the nerve to use the term butch, but you claim that you're not a carpet muncher. That's crazy to me. And she's like, I like boys though. I've always liked boys. And she goes, don't worry, you just haven't met the right boy yet. You're not really, you know. And as you can imagine, that cuts Jo deeply. And the gag is, Lynette invited Jo over the next day so they could bump pocketbooks. And then the next day after that, like they didn't just bump pocketbooks, Lynette is prancing in front of the mirror, trying on dresses to go on a date with a boy. And then she's gonna sit up here and tell Jo that she is planning to go all the way with said boy. Like, you didn't just do what you did the day before. Lynette is so deep far up in the closet, and her internalized homophobia is really pissing me off, because what the fuck is wrong with you? And that's where that chapter ends. So now we're back on to Bethy. So remember when I said that Bethy developed a binge eating disorder? So she started a diet, right, with these drinks called, what is it? Metrical. I'll put it right here on the screen. Metrical, I think. This was Slim Fast before Slim Fast even existed, okay? Essentially, she starts starving herself because the only thing she consumes are these little shakes. And she is so desperate to get her thin frame back, and I am feeling for Bethy right now in this moment. I went through something very similar very briefly in my girlhood. And of course, Big Sister Jo told her not to do it because that's not healthy. And she's like, don't do that. You're gonna make yourself sick. And of course, Bethy doesn't listen. So Bethy goes to an audition for a school play, and this is where she and us meet Harold. Harold is a black boy, and he is the star of the football team. He's very quiet and sweet, docile. He a teddy bear. And Harold is only auditioning for this play. He has to because of a punishment from his coach, so that's why he's here. And as time goes on, you know, with rehearsals and stuff, Bethy and Harold become friends, and she develops a harmless little crush on him. And Harold does not reciprocate because he looks at Bethy as a little sister type shit. And at this point, Bethy is still drinking that Metrocal, and she was losing more weight very rapidly, okay? And in an effort to get her to eat, like actually eat some food, Joe goes and pours all her shakes down a drink. Joe was proved right when Bethy fainted in the middle of rehearsal one day. She was like, you need to start eating. Like, eat something, please. You're making yourself sick. And even Harold became worried about her at one point. They're like, girl, this is not what you need to do. Like, we want better for you, baby, okay? Joe is fed up with the bullshit, okay? So they go home and she makes Bethy eat half a sandwich. And this is when Joe realizes that Bethy's eating disorder is linked to Uncle Mel. So she motivated Bethy to, quote unquote, not let him win. Alrighty, next chapter. It is now Thanksgiving, and Joe is reminiscing about the annual traditions that she used to do with her dad. Now it's just the girls and Sarah won't have time to cook everything, so she enlists the girls for some help. And Joe is on Jell-O duty. This is the 60s. This is when Jell-O was considered like a big dessert. She's on Jell-O duty because she's not that great at cooking. So she's like, I'll do the Jell-O. Don't worry about it. And she decides to make the Jell-O at Lynette's house so she can get a little help with it and also to go bump pocketbooks again. They was So Joe was telling Lynette how she wants to support her black friends in the fight for equality, but Lynette is staying regressive. She's like, it's not our problem. Let's not worry about it. I'm like, bitch. And Lynette even goes as far to say that Joe is only pretending to be progressive so she can rebel against her mom. And that's actually crazy, because what do you mean by that? So after they're done making the Jell-O, Joe and Lynette decide to have a little steamy shower together. So they're running through the house naked. They're running through the house naked, right? And one of Lynette's little brothers catches them in the act, running through the house naked. This scares Lynette because she thinks her brother is gonna tell her parents what he saw. So she sends Joe back home. So Joe goes back home and she running a little late, so she's rushing to get ready and everything. Some family and some neighbors come over and Sarah is micromanaging everything, especially Joe. And Joe's trying her best not to, like, you know, make a mess out of things. She's trying to keep her mom from, you know, blowing her lid. And then under all the pressure, Joe cracks and she ends up accidentally dropping a Jell-O all over the carpet. This pisses Sarah off, of course, and she starts berating Joe in front of everybody. Joe can't take no more. So what's she do? She blows up and she's saying stuff like, nothing I do is ever good enough for you. And she was saying, I bet you wish I died instead so it'd just be you and little Miss Perfect. I was like, oh. So Sarah hops up and slaps her across the face again. I'm like, what is with you and slapping this girl? Like, do you really hate your daughter that much? And you know what she do? She outs Joe in front of everybody. So my notes say to read page 119. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to read page 119. For a moment, Joe stood unmoving, feeling the blood rush to her face. She could see the people at the table, but it was like she was looking up at them from the bottom of a lake. Their faces and voices were distorted and seemed very far away. You're a bitch, she finally said. And she heard Barbara Simoneau gasp. Bubby said something short and sharp and giddish. Here now, Henry Shizevsky, excuse me, roared. Here now, that's enough. Sarah raised her chin. And do you know what you are? She asked. You think I don't know about you? Sarah had dropped her voice to a whisper, low and dangerous. I don't know about you and your little girlfriend. You're unnatural. I'm gonna keep reading. Joe felt like she'd been thrown into a frozen river. Her chest was tight and her mind was whirling. What did her mother know? What had she seen? Had Lynette's brothers told their parents and had the Bobecks call the house and told Sarah? Or was her mother just guessing, stitching together supposition and paranoia, and coming up with the worst? Except, Joe thought, the worst was true. Something was wrong with her. She was broken, she was twisted, and she was unnatural like her mother had said. She would never be fixed or made right. That was definitely very, very heavy. Like, oh my gosh. Imagine knowing that your mother has hated you your whole life and then she outs you in front of all your friends and family and neighbors. So Joe runs away. She's contemplating life, and then she comes back later. And then Sarah somewhat apologizes, like all moms do from the older generations, talking about some, you hungry? Girl. Why do older parents do that? That's their way. They never actually say, I'm sorry or I apologize. They'd be like, you want some food? Like, girl, I would love an apology is what I want. And as they're eating together, Sarah says she just wants the best for Joe, which is to have a husband and a family. And that is not what life is about. Like, you missing the point. Like, Joe can be so much more than just a mother and a wife. But hey, product of the times. And Joe's sitting there like, okay, well maybe I don't want all that. And this chapter ends with them coming to a silent resolve. So I guess they just kind of, never really talked about it after that. They just kind of said, okay, Joe's gay. Let's leave it at that. And never talked about it ever again. All right, part 2 of the book. The year is now 1962, and we are back in Bethy's POV. And we learned that Bethy is going to visit Joe at college, and Joe is going to U of M in Ann Arbor. And when she gets there, Bethy ends up running into Harold. Small world, he goes to U of M too. So they're hanging out, and they catch up, and Bethy is begging Joe for her to take her to a college party, and she ultimately decides to go on her own. So Bethy goes to the party, and she meets this hippie drug dealer named Devin. He is totally infatuated with Bethy, and vice versa. But mind y'all, Bethy is still in high school. This is the college party. Devin is a grown-ass man. And by this point, Devin's probably like, what, I'm guessing 21, because he's in college. So Devin gets Bethy to try some LSD, and she starts tripping in this party around all these strangers, okay? And luckily, thank goodness that Harold was there, because oh my gosh, he rescues her and he escorts her back to the dorm, okay? All right, back to Joe. So Joe's in college doing her college thing, and she's got a new obsession. I mean, crush. And her name is Shelly. Shelly is rich. She's very flippant. She's like a type B mod 60s girl, and she's uber impulsive. So Joe is walking us through where she was the exact moment when she found out that President John F. Kennedy was shot. The whole campus was in shambles, girl, as I could imagine. Especially Joe, because she actually believed that Kennedy was going to make a significant change, bringing all races into equality. So Joe and Shelly actually start hanging out because they're a part of the same activist group on campus, right? So Joe tells Shelly what radicalized her, the Frida and May incident. And they get to know each other pretty well, and they eventually start dating. That's pretty much that whole chapter. Back to Bethy. So she comes up with a lie and tells her mother that she is going to summer school. That's where she'll be at, during the summer. Meanwhile, she's planning to spend time with greasy ass Devin. So it turns out Dev is actually 6 years older than Bethy. So let's do some math real quick. Bethy's about a year and a half younger than Joe. Joe is going into her sophomore year of college. So let's say Joe is 18, which makes Bethy at the youngest 16 going on 17, which makes Devin 23. So she's been shacking up with him over the summer, doing drugs and doing the nasty. Cause and we learned that counterculture stick it to the man Devin comes from a normal Dick and Jane family with Monty. He has oh my god! I just stuck that entire brush in my eye. Oh, Devin's father is a dentist and his mother is a dental hygienist. So when it's time, Bethy ends up going to U of M as well, and she decides to become a hippie herself. That whole Miss America 1950s princess thing out the window, and she trades it in for a carefree, open-minded flower child. And Joe notices this shift right away, and she's worried, as any big sister would be. And especially since Bethy's about to go on a road trip with Devin and all his friends who she barely knows. And I think that they're going to Woodstock. They were talking about some nondescript music festival. I'm like, it's the late 60s. I put two and two together. They're going to Woodstock. So when they get there, Devin immediately leaves Bethy by herself. Big red flag. So Bethy decides to explore the festival grounds alone, and she ended up taking some drugs, so she's tripping again. So Bethy runs into this guy who offers to take her to his tent to lay down and sleep off the bad trip. And this is where it takes a turn for the worse. A group of guys take advantage of Bethy while she's nearly unconscious. And as you can imagine, Bethy is having some very deep regrets about going on this road trip. What a way to close the chapter, like, oh my goodness. So now we're back to Joe. Joe is still dating Shelly. So Joe is still dating Shelly, and she plans to fulfill her dreams of moving to New York and becoming a writer. But she plans to do all of this after her summer trip in Europe. Shelly is high-key getting in the way of Joe's plans because she wants to join the damn Peace Corps. Remember how I said Shelly's impulsive? This is one of her moments. And Joe alludes to the fact that sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes she has to use sex in order to persuade Shelly into doing something because she is so stubborn. Red flag, because you should never have to do that in your relationship ever. So one day, they decide to go to Shelly's house, and Shelly thinks that Joe is going to judge her because of the way that she's brought up. Shelly comes from old money, so her family's rich as and they basically live in a small castle. So when the house is completely empty of the family, Joe and Shelly decide to go skinny dipping. So Joe goes to grab some more towels from Shelly's room, and this is where she finds a wedding dress in her closet. So Joe had put 2 and 2 together for all the times that Shelly had canceled on her or made excuses, right? And this lit a rage up in her, and honestly, me too, because what are you doing? So she snatches the wedding dress up out of the closet and she confronts Shelly. Y'all, I gotta read this part. I'm sorry, I have to read this part. You're not gonna get it until I read it. Joe stood in front of the closet as pieces clicked together in her mind. The time Shelly had disappeared, the excuses she had at the ready, stories about parties or her parents or a pair of shoes that she needed to retrieve. "You've got shoes here," Joe had said that night, and Shelly had rolled her eyes at her fashion backward girlfriend and said, "Not the right ones." Last Friday, her mother had needed her to drive her to a synagogue sisterhood meeting. The Wednesday before that, there were forms that the family accountant had asked her to sign, and she'd be gone all afternoon. Joe remembered how she'd come to the apartment and found Shelly moody and quiet, smoking on her window seat with her legs pulled up to her chest, and how Shelly's kisses had an almost frantic quality, how she'd grab onto Joe like she had something to prove. A rage stronger than anything she'd ever felt suffused her, flushing her face, curling her hands into fists, making her feel like her skin was going to split. Before she knew what she was doing, Joe grabbed the dress, gathering it into her arms, holding it against her as she ran down the stairs. By the time she got to the pool, Shelly was sitting up squinting at her, one hand shading her eyes. When she saw what Joe was holding, she cringed as if Joe had struck her. For a moment, Joe just glared. In a voice that sounded raspy, she asked, "When's the big day?" "January," Shelly whispered with her eyes cast down. "New Year's Day." "And who's the lucky guy?" "Dennis Ziskin." What? Never mind. Shelly's voice was barely audible. Joe remembered the name, the boy Shelly had called her boyfriend when they first met, the one who she said was overseas studying in London. Of course, good old Denny. Good for him. Joe's voice was high and sounded brittle. She sounded, she thought, like her mother. "When were you going to tell me? On our way to the airport? On the plane?" "I thought," Shelly wrapped her wet towel around her shoulders, gripping the edges tightly. "I thought we could have our trip. I wanted to see the world with you like we planned. I thought we could have that. I wanted to see the world with you like we planned. I thought I could have that. And then you thought you'd come home and get married." "I wanted to tell you." Shelly sounded like she was crying, but Joe couldn't bring herself to look. "I hated lying. I tried 100 times." "So what was the problem? Why didn't you just say it?" Joe asked. "Why couldn't you tell me the truth?" "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. I wanted to have what we have for as long as I could." Shelly's hands were twisting in her lap and her expression was anguished. "Why not forever? Why do you have to get married? Why can't we be with each other?" Shelly's voice was flat. "You know why it can't be that way." "Why not?" Joe asked. She was trembling with anger and with fear and with the growing certainty that this was the end, the final hour she would spend with the girl she loved. She felt like her world was splitting open, sending everything spinning and flying away. How could she go through her days brushing her teeth and putting on clothes and talking to other people now that this had happened? How could she survive this kind of pain? "Because that's not how the world works." Shelly's voice cracked as she said, "I love you, Joe, you know I do, but I'm not brave like you are. I couldn't live with people staring at me and whispering about me and not wanting their kids around me. It doesn't have to be like that. You know it doesn't. We talked about this." Joe heard her voice cracking. "We could go." "Go where?" Shelly demanded, sitting up straight, tossing her braid over her shoulder. Her neck and chest were flushed and her hands were fisted at the towel's hem. Tell me where could we go where 2 women could live together and people would be okay with it?" "New York," Joe said, "or San Francisco. There's places, Shell, you know there are." Shelley was shaking her head. My parents would disown me. I wouldn't be able to explain it to them or my grandparents. My brothers. Shelley let the towel slide down her shoulders as she buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she cried in a terrible broken voice. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She lifted her hands and looked at Joe, her face miserable, her eyes filled with tears. I want to be with you more than anything. I love you, Joe, I do. I thought I could be brave, but I can't. But you promised. Joe's voice was a little kid's whisper. A girl who'd been told she could trick-or-treat until 8 o'clock and whose mother had changed the curfew and pulled her inside at 7:30. She hated herself for sounding like such a baby. She hated herself for believing that Shelley ever intended to make a life with her. I know, Shelley bent her head, not arguing. You probably hate me. You should hate me. I'm awful. Joe stared at her, stunned and numb. Her beautiful Shelley with her damp hair and flushed cheeks and silver gray eyes full of tears. And then, without planning it, without considering her action or its consequences, she gathered the heavy satin dress in her arms and heaved it as hard as she could into the water. Woo! Baby! If that were me, Joe, listen, Joe, she's better than me because, honey, I couldn't. I couldn't. Okay, ooh, she better than me for real. Okay, no, I'm not even loving the eyes. I gotta start over on these two, sorry. So after all this, Joe still goes on her solo trip in Europe. I have never changed my makeup this much in a reading Rouge before. This is not my day. So she's doing her best to get over Shelley when she gets a message from her mother in America. It's a telegram that says, emergency, come home now, your sister needs you. So being the best big sister, as she always is, she drops everything she's doing to go home and be by her sister's side. Next chapter, and we're back in Bethy's POV, and honey, she is going through a very tough, deep depression right now since the Woodstock incident. She barely leaves her bed, and her and Devin broke up. And the fun train just keeps on a choo-chooing because she goes to the doctor and she finds out that she got the clap. And not only does she have the clap, she's pregnant. She pregnant. And this is when Sarah telegrams Joe and tells her to come home. Because girl, what the hell? And she also telegrams Joe because she thinks that Joe has easy access to tons of money because Sarah is still thinking that Joe and Shelley are together, but they ain't. But Joe actually does have some rainy day money put back. It was for her self-discovery trip. She's gonna take another trip. Now Joe and Bethy are in some random ass building that isn't a doctor's office waiting for their termination. So they take Bethy into a sketchy room, you know, with a single bed in the entire space. They are very rough with her and brutal, and they're highly critical of her decision to do this. And I should say hypocritical because they took her goddamn money to perform the procedure. So what are we doing here? So after that very traumatic experience, Bethy chooses to drop out of school and work in the department store where her mom was working at. And her eating disorder comes back. Baby girl Bethy is going through it. Bethy is going through it, truly, utterly, honestly. And in this dark time, Bethy decides to give her youth another try. So after stealing a wallet from her handsy boss, she jumps on the first Greyhound she sees and she leaves for California in hopes of finding Devin. Girl, leave Devin alone because clearly he ain't the one. Alright, now we're back to Joe. So if y'all haven't been paying attention, we done been through some shit and we're only halfway through the book at this point, right? And I'm here to tell you that now is when the shit gets thick. So this next chapter opens up with Joe at Shelley's heterosexual wedding. Y'all should have seen my face when I read this part. And on top of all that, Joe is one of Shelley's bridesmaids. Oh my god. Like, what is this shit? Like I said before, Joe is better than me for real. She really is better than me. Now we're at the reception and this is where Joe meets Dave, a tall, lanky goofball trying to match. I don't know why, but I immediately envisioned Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker in The Amazing Spider-Man. So they end up talking, they get to know each other, they flirt a little bit or whatever. And I recorded my reaction in real time when I was reading this, and I feel like my past self can explain it better than me right now, so take it away. Okay, same character, right?
that's been a lesbian this whole time. Like, she has been a lesbian / tomboy this entire book, and she's still at the ex-lover's wedding, right? This guy comes up to her, starts flirting with her, right? Not knowing that she is girly pop, okay? And she had a few drinks, right? And the guy was like, my friends made a bet, you know, saying if I could make you smile, they gonna pay me. And so they actually start getting along and dancing the whole night and like getting to know each other. There was a time jump. It cut to 6 weeks later, and this girl gave this man her virginity, like her actual virginity. Like, she's had sex, but she lost her virginity to girls only, so it really didn't. It was different. She had sex with a man for the first time, and they just did a simple 6-week time jump. The author didn't like go into detail about their relationship building up to that moment. We didn't get shit. I had to stop reading. Like, we just did a time jump from them bonding at a wedding. Like, they just met each other that night, and then 6 weeks later she gave him the V card. The pacing in this book has been like on fast speed, like from the get-go. Like, it's a very interesting story, but the author's like, the timing and the pacing, there's too much shit. I would have liked to see their development as a couple first, and I would like to see this character's thought process in his thinking, maybe I'm bisexual. Maybe I do like men's as well as women's. Because thus far, she's been a lesbian. She been eating pussy. She been carpet munching this whole time. But then this charismatic, goofy ass, attractive man comes by, and he's not like any other guys that she's met. And that is enough to dissuade like her lesbianisms. So she bisexual now. There was too many missed points, and I don't know how to feel about that. There was so much material like that could have been written down about this, like her being confused, like I thought I only like girls, but this guy's really attractive. I'm attracted to him, and I want to give him my virginity. She didn't explore none of that. Well, I don't think she did, because I just saw the part where it said 6 weeks later, Valentine's Day, Joe decided to give up her virginity. That's what, paraphrasing, that's all I read, and I had to close the book and come back on here. Hopefully they go into depth about why she decided to date a man and how she came to... Sorry, I got cut off. Hopefully the author delves into why she decided to go out with the man for the first time. Not the first time. She said she tried to be normal in high school. She used to date boys, but not really, because, you know, she was a lesbian at that point. But like I was saying, I hope the author goes into her thought process of, you know, thinking, maybe I am bisexual. I thought I used to only like girls, but now I like this guy. But thus far, what is that? What is on my eye? Thus far, no explanation. Just a time jump saying that she done gave this man her coochie. That's it. So.
And that's not where it stops. They get f***ing married. Long story short, Joe decided to settle and marry a man because the idea of actually living in her truth and being free was like so far-fetched at this point. So she did it for security, which I can understand. And on top of all of that, Dave knows that Joe is a lesbian. Well, I guess she's bi now, but he don't care. He willing to make it work because he does actually love her. So he's like, you know what? That's cool that you used to, you know, go down on girls. That's fine. I can live with that. And that's where this part of the book ends. Now we're at part 3. We're back to Bethy's POV, and the year is 1974. So Bethy has fallen back into her hippy dippy ways. Now she's like a very heightened hetero version of Joe. And she's been around the world, and she can't find her baby. Her mother is picking her up from the airport, yet from another journey. Have y'all ever seen Forrest Gump? Bethy is currently in her 60s and 70s Ginny era. That's where she's at right now. And let me say, her first week back is not going so well. She gets arrested during a drug deal. So yeah. And she's not coping well with all her bad decision making. So she up and leaves again, this time to New York. And it's here that she meets a woman named Ronnie, who is part of a collective of several women. Bethy, thinking that, you know, things can't get any worse, she decides to go home with the stranger she met in the park. So Bethy is taken to a commune called Blue Hill Farm. Long story short, Bethy joins a hippie feminist cult. And you know what? It's giving, have y'all seen Swarm, the show on Prime? It's giving the cult from Swarm, where Billie Eilish was the cult leader. That's what it's giving. And we get a time jump from Bethy and Ronnie meeting to Bethy reenacting the experience of her birth. And she's doing this in order to confront her demons and relieve herself of her trauma. It's literally a rebirthing ritual. Like I said, hippie feminist cult. And lo and behold, it actually works, okay? She completely broke down and released all those demons and all that trauma that she was holding on to. So I guess, girl. Ultimately, Bethy decides that Blue Hill Farm is the place that she wants to be. She wants to be surrounded by women who see her and support her. And now that I'm, this is so funny. Now that I'm thinking back on this part in the book, this reminds me of that scene in Midsommar where all the cult women were crying with Danny. I don't know why, but it just gave that. I know I'm pulling every cult example out of the book, but that's what it reminded me of. Alright, now we're back in Jo's POV, and she is picking up Bethy from the train station. Bethy always needs somebody picking her up, damn. So Jo is still married to Dave, but now she has 2 daughters. Her oldest daughter, Kim, and her second daughter, Melissa, but they call her Missy. Jo is now a mild-mannered suburb mom, and I was so devastated. I was devastated out of my mind about this update, because Jo, you was supposed to be living your best gay life, marching in the streets with the vulva hat on. And at this point in the book, this is where we see both Jo and Bethy completely switch personalities. Jo has the life that Bethy thought she wanted when she was younger. Bethy has a version of a life that Jo wanted for herself, to be a free, liberated woman with no worries in the world. Anyways, Bethy is visiting Jo and her family for the holidays, okay? And Jo tells us that her and Bethy have grown apart due to Bethy being a little too carefree for her tastes. She feels as though she's different now, more mature, and she feels that Bethy's new personality is too bold to like mesh with hers. I don't like that either. Okay, I'm sorry. Last time that I am changing my eyeshadow, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, and then I realized I didn't, but whatever. So all of the husbands in Jo's part of the neighborhood, they are at some kind of conference, and they end up getting stuck up there because there's about to be a blizzard, right? Jo's neighbor and good friend Noni comes over to tell them that all the women and children are waiting the storm out at her house. So she invites Jo, her daughters, and Bethy to come wait out the storm with them. They go over there, y'all, and there's a smorgasbord of food, kids running around everywhere, and housewives drinking by the fireplace. So it's a time, as you can imagine. And Bethy, with all her newfound worldly wisdom, gets the bright idea to do some consciousness raising at this little, party, shut-in party. And she does this by having the women answer some very deep and personal questions. They have very meaningful conversations of womanhood, feminism, including, what it is to be a woman, responsibilities, duties as such, motherhood, and all of the regrets that they have. Also, that night when everybody is sleeping, Jo finally fesses up to Bethy and tells her what happened between her and Shelley. Speaking of Shelly, speak of the devil, the next day or whenever it is, Shelly pops up at Joe's house unannounced, all to tell Joe that her husband left her and she regrets what she did all those years ago. That's right. I feel that guilt. And Joe turned into JoJo at that moment because she was like, the nerve of you, Shelly. And then you gift her a typewriter as to say sorry. Like, it's as if that's a good enough apology for everything that you put this girl through. And this little, you know, surprise visit has Joe reeling all over again. So she don't know what she want to do, honey. So going on to the next chapter, it's Bethy's POV again. And it basically begins with her inner monologue saying that she knows her sister is full of shit. She knows this isn't really how Joe is, and she feels like she's looking at an imposter, not her sister. She is blaming herself because she thinks if she had never asked Joe to come home, then maybe she would have got to live the life that she dreamt of. And so Bethy's still visiting Joe and her family, and so she's been begging Joe to come stay at the commune with her for a couple days, you know, get away, take a break. Her ulterior motive is to really like open Joe's eyes and, you know, get her out of that suburban hell. And Joe has excuses, valid excuses, you know, mainly concerning her kids. Like, you know, I just can't up and leave my kids. You know, they have routines. They can't stray from their routines. But then Joe ultimately decides that she'll go. You know, she needs a break anyway. Fine, whatever. So Joe and Bethy leave and they go back to Blue Hill Farm. Joe gets to see the farm and the commune and the cult. She gets to see how Bethy's been living. So while she's there, Bethy finally decides to confront Joe about how she's living a lie. She exposes Joe, tells her about herself. And the worst part about all of this is that Bethy is right. She may have not went about it the right way, but she was right, and Joe knew that. And of course, this rubs Joe all the way wrong, okay? Especially because she knows her sister is telling the truth. And Bethy confesses to Joe that she feels guilty. She feels like she is responsible for the way that Joe's life turned out because, you know, she made Joe come home all those years ago. And tensions start to rise. They get to arguing and bickering. And Bethy let it slip that she feels that it's Joe's fault for what happened between her and Uncle Mel. Because, like I said, Joe, she wasn't there that summer. She was working at a summer camp. And it was just Bethy and her mom at home. She says if Joe was around more, it wouldn't have happened. Which I feel like is unfair. That's totally unfair. But I understand her pain, but that's not right to like blame your sister for what happened to you. And after this argument, you guessed it, they stopped talking for a long time. So we're back in Joe's POV and we find out that Dave took out a hefty loan for a business venture. Damn, the one time I decided to do eyeliner, this is like the 8th time I messed up my face tonight. Anyway, Dave has a history of doing this. He likes get-rich-quick schemes, and he's had many failed investments. This is not my night for the makeup. This is not going well. Anyway, Joe is like just so fed up. She's done at this point. She's numb. So numb that she lets this man bust inside her raw for the 3rd time, conceiving their 3rd daughter. So you're that fed up with him. You are that done to where you let him get you pregnant for a 3rd time. I don't think I said this before, but Joe doesn't really enjoy intercourse with Dave because she's still like women's, okay? So she's learned to like, I guess, tolerate it. It's not that it doesn't feel good, but it's just like, you know, it's okay, I guess, is what she's saying. I don't think I ever mentioned that, but you know, yeah, she tolerates sex with David because he is a man. And yeah, that's the end of that chapter. So next chapter, we're back on Bethy, and Bethy decides to take Blue Hill Farm to the next level, and she decides that she's gonna open a store with the same name that sells all of the farm goods. They made jam, bombs, soap, deodorant, all types of stuff like from scratch, and they were selling it at the farmer's market initially. So she goes into town, you know, to get a loan from a bank. And what do you know? She runs into Harold, who is her banker. So it flashes forward to Bethy and Harold reconnecting, and they start dating. And the way that Bethy was raised and primed as a child she was the last somebody that I expected to date a black man. And of course, they deal with the standard racism and judgment that I'm sure all interracial couples have experienced at least one point in their relationship. I'm pretty sure we're still in the 70s at this point in the book, so some people were still very openly racist. But I thought it was nice to see Bethy and Harold love each other out loud despite, you know, their fears. And girl, they together now. They together. They an item and stuff. It's sweet. Go Bethy. All right, part 4 of the book. So we're back on Joe, and the year is now 1987. Joe's girls are growing up, and they are growing up fast, okay? Her 2 oldest daughters are now teenagers, and her 3rd baby girl, Lila, is about like, what, 6 or 7 or something? I don't know. And it's here we learn that Lila is the problem child. Lila is what Sarah thought Joe was when she was a child. And we're learning that Joe's regrets are deepening, and she's trying to rekindle the fire that she had for her original life goals, like, you know, becoming a writer. Truth be told, Joe is a little envious of Bethy's success with her store because she's doing the things that she wish she could. Yeah, Bethy is a whole businesswoman out here, and she got money, okay? She well off now because of that Blue Farm store. So Joe and her girls are visiting her mom for her 70th birthday. Excuse me, I don't know why I couldn't say that. And Bethy's here too with Harold and everything. And this chapter ends on a cliffhanger. It ends with Sarah telling her daughters that she needs to tell them something. Next chapter, and we're in Bethy's point of view again. And that cliffhanger was a precursor to another traumatic event. Sarah, their mom, has died from cancer, and now we are stationed at the Shiva after her funeral. And Sarah's death gives the girls the chance to reconcile their issues from the past. Okay, no. I can't and I won't. That is awful. Maybe the eyeliner is not for me, so I'm just gonna not do it, because look at that. That is literally insane. That is hideous. Ugh. Yeah, so with all that making up they did, Bethy offers Joe hella money so she can take the trip that she never got to take when she was younger. Ooh, my eye is gonna be so raw tomorrow because of all this reconstruction I've been doing on my eye. Dang. Anyway, so next chapter, and we're back on Joe. And Joe's friend, Noni, from the shut-in party, she asks Joe if she can help her get into shape because, you know, Joe is an athlete. So she starts training Noni, and she's doing pretty good. And Noni encourages Joe to start a fitness class with all the neighborhood women because she's so good at what she does. So we also learn that Joe has a crush on Noni. She's had a crush on Joni since, what? Joe and Noni. She's had a crush on Noni since they moved into that neighborhood. Noni is that outspoken, outgoing friend that'll push you to achieve your goals, you know? That's the type of girl she is. So Joe takes Noni's advice and she starts a fitness class at the fitness center in the neighborhood, and she started making a little money from it. And we all know that she needs it because Dave's stupid ass can't get his shit together with his financial irresponsibility. Then Noni gets the bright idea to say that Joe should start making workout videotapes and start selling them because, you know, this is the era of that. She's like, you'll be so good at it, oh my god. And so Joe, being like, that's not really me, she's very hesitant, but then she ends up deciding to go for it. She's like, you know what can it hurt? That, you know, we can do this, whatever. So she takes the idea to Dave. She's like, hey, I'm looking for your support in this. What do you think? And he immediately shuts her down, being super non-supportive, talking about, it's not a lucrative business and it's gonna fail. You're gonna fail. So I vote against it. He-ho. And it's like, oh, so now that I have a business venture that I want to pursue, it's a problem. And then a few days after that, Joe goes down to the basement to talk to Dave, and girl, he upset. He crying, right? He crying. This is where Dave is asking Joe for a divorce. You asked her to get married and now you want a divorce. Like, how does that work? And Joe is like low-key relieved at this. She's like, finally, I don't have to like pretend that I'm in love with this guy that I married for my own security. But then she's like, wait, why? Why do you want to divorce me? Like, what's going on? And the reason why he wants a divorce is because he's having an affair with Noni, the same Noni who Joe confided in Y'all, just look at my reaction when I read this part.
Okay. So I'm reading, right? I'm still reading the same book that I was reading last week. Bitch. Oh my God. So you remember that one character I was talking about, the one that was a lesbian and then she settled for a lavender marriage, seemingly so. She became straight or bisexual. So this whole time, it's been like 100 pages at this point, right? Probably even more than that. So between that happening and what I just read, what I just got to, what I just finished, she had 3 kids. She gave this man 3 kids. She got 3 daughters now, right? She's like 42 or something now at this point. And she still likes women. She has a crush on one of her like neighborhood girlies. And she's been helping her get in shape. Cause you know, Jo, that's her name. She been very athletic since she was younger, right? So sports and athletics are her thing. Working out is her thing. And so she get home, right? And so her husband, Dave, her lavender marriage husband, Dave, he's like, hey, Jo, let's talk. So she gets down to the home office in a basement and shit. And he's crying just like a man. Just, you know what? I think you know where this is going. He's crying. He's upset. She's like, oh my God, what's wrong? And he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, what's happening? And he's like, I want a divorce. And so she's happy at first. She's like, yes, finally, I can be who I want to be. I can get away from him. Not that she doesn't like him, but she wants to live in her truth. But then she's like, wait, why do you want to divorce me? I've given you everything that you ever wanted. And I let you get away with all this shit. I'm not going to bring that up. But anyway, he said, there's someone else. Or no. She asked, is there someone else? He was like, yes. And then she was like, well, who is it? He has been having an affair with the same woman that she has a crush on. Let me just say this. The woman, the other woman / the crush, her name is Noni. She has been nothing. Here's the thing. This whole time, since they've been friends, she has been nothing but supportive. And Jo, like, she's been supporting Jo in all of her endeavors. She pushed her to, like, you know, start a fitness class. She pushed her to start doing all these things, right? And she's been, like, a supportive, nice friend the whole time she was f***ing your husband. And I'm not saying it's okay because Jo has been wanting to leave Dave. She's been wanting to leave Dave, but that's still not right because they are still married. They are still together in the same household. And bitch, you had the nerve to be smiling in my face, being my personal cheerleader while you're my husband? You're my lavender marriage husband? Oh, because there's layers to it. There's layers to the shit. There's layers to the shit. I'm just in awe. Because I didn't think this book was going to get even messier. Like, from the get, like, shit has been happening. But, God. Oh. The 2 main characters in this book, Jo and Bethy, they can never catch a break. But especially my girl Jo. Because oh my gosh. The reading Rouge on this is going to be crazy. I'm telling y'all.
All right, now we're in part 5 of the book. And we're back to Bethy. And the year is now 1993. We in the 90s now. So Bethy's at the airport and she's picking up Lila, Jo's baby girl. We find out from Bethy's POV that she had a I told you so moment with Jo when she found out about the affair and the divorce. Oh, excuse me. And on top of all that, Dave moved in with Noni, who lives down the street from Jo. Look, no. She is so much better than me. I would have burned that bitch to the ground. We also learned that Jo is going through it. It's very hard right now with her being a single mother of 3. And she is trying to put her 2 daughters her 2 oldest daughters through college right now. And being a good little sister, Bethy offers to help in any way she can. So she decides to have Lila come stay with her, you know, so Jo can have a little time to herself, get herself together. And Lila is your standard 90s grunge, misfit, depressed teenager, okay? And Bethy is trying literally everything she can to connect with her niece, but she's not budging. Like, nothing is cheering this little girl up at all. Okay, what is going on with me tonight? Why am I making really bad decisions with my makeup? And Bethy is truly worried about her niece because she knows what it's like to be in her shoes. She was once young and depressed too. She ain't forget. And days before Lila is supposed to go back home, she asks if she could stay with Bethy and Harold. And Lila doesn't want to go home because she thinks that Jo hates her, which certainly is not the case at all. So Lila finally opens up to Bethy and she tells her that essentially she feels less than because she grew up in the shadow of her 2 older sisters who seemingly are good at everything that they do. And they have a real connection, and Bethy is there to comfort her niece, which is so sweet. And when Bethy goes to check on Lila that following morning, she turned up missing. This girl done ran away, y'all. Just like her mother did all those years ago, like mother, like daughter. She went missing. It was a whole shebang. They got the cops involved in everything. Bethy eventually finds Lila at the original Blue Hill farm. And Bethy decides to tell Lila about what happened to her when she was young. Both the Uncle Mel incident and the Woodstock incident. The point of Bethy telling Lila all of this is so she could show Lila how her mom came in and swooped in and saved her, like, time and time again, and that she does, you know, Jo does love Lila. It says read pages 395 to 397. I'm not reading it right now. Next chapter, and we are back on Jo. Jo has had a rough go of it these past few years since the divorce. Now that it's just her and Lila in the house, things have been very rocky. So yeah, Lila isn't even trying to understand why things are the way they are, and she also idolizes her piece of dad over her mother, so that's never fun. And Jo has been busting her ass trying to help Lila, but nothing she does is good enough. So one day, her second oldest, Missy, comes home from college, and automatically Jo knows that something is up, but she thinks that Missy has a problem. So Missy actually ends up taking Jo to the Blockbuster. This is the 90s, they still had Blockbusters back then. And she finds a fitness tape starring Noni on the front cover. Is levels to it. Is levels to it. The woman who was f***ing your husband, this same woman who was encouraging you, supporting you, telling you to do a fitness tape, now she wanted to do a fitness tape. And at the bottom of the box, it says a Dave Braverman production. Same man who didn't support it when Jo wanted it to do, but now that he with his little whore, now he want to support the endeavors. He want to support the arts. And Jo has a little bit of a psychotic break in the middle of the store, and she just busts out laughing. Because what else could you do at this point when you've been put through so much shit? Like, I would have started laughing too, out of straight, like, she was manic. So Jo has had enough. She is done, D-O-N-E. So she decides to sue both Dave and Noni. Ooh, it's the hair. It was most definitely the hair, because I wasn't feeling my makeup until I let my hair down, girl. She's gonna sue them basically for like plagiarism or like stealing her likeness or whatever for the moves done in the video and the sign-off messages. So Jo actually still has a few copies from the previous years when she did make her own workout videos, and she used that as evidence, and she whooped Dave's ass in court as she should. He was stuck stuttering, stumbling, couldn't even back up his claim because he knew what he did was wrong, and he did steal that shit. So, bitch. Yeah. So after she ended up whooping Dave's ass in court, she got a huge settlement check, and she used that money to finally go on that trip that she's been wanting to go on like for pretty much half her life. And you know where she ends up? She ends up in Denver. You know who lives in Denver? Shelly. She goes back to her after all these years, after everything she's put her through, and Shelly's thirsty ass took her back with the quickness. So they deserve each other. And this high-key pissed me off because I never thought that they were in game, I guess. This is who we're stuck stuck with. Alright, part 6 of the book. We're getting to the end, y'all. We're still rocking with Joe, but the year is 2006 now. And Joe and Shelly are headed to Kim's house, her eldest daughter, for Thanksgiving. Joe has breast cancer and she was thinking of telling the girls at dinner. So Kim is a very successful lawyer, honey, and she is married to another successful lawyer. Her husband is one of those Wall Street pricks. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, that should explain enough. Kim's husband comes from money, and he has this snobby ass mama who is judgmental and always got something to say. Don't like her. We also learned that Lila grew up and really became a problem child. She is now an irresponsible, spoiled party girl, okay? Who is disrespectful as mind you. And she's not doing anything meaningful with her life. She's just wasting it away and being the worst daughter to her mother ever. And we also get an update on how Missy's doing. She's doing super well. She's an executive assistant to a very rich and prominent editor in New York at this publishing house. She's doing her big one. She's doing great. And Joe always told herself that, you know, Lila will eventually, you know, mature. She'll wake up and she'll get her life on track. But Lila is making that very, very hard for it to even become a possibility. Because she out here wilding and shit. So when they get there, Kim and Joe start catching up, and she opens up to Joe that, you know, she feels like a bad mom because she's so overwhelmed with motherhood, and Joe offers her some lovely motherly advice. And then Kim also tells Joe that she probably won't be going back to work, and Joe smells something off because she's like, my daughter would never. My daughter is a workaholic. She already knows that this was her husband's idea. And it's like, ugh, like, you're that type of, you wanted him, you wanted him. Like, God forbid your wife make more money than you, bitch. Like, oh my God. She also tells Joe that the last time that Lila stayed at her house, she saw her laptop, and she saw that Lila was looking for sugar daddies. And she was like, Mama, you might want to nip that in the bud and see what's going on, because... So the whole family sits down for Thanksgiving dinner, and here comes Lila strutting in, fashionably late, making a scene. She even gets into a fight with Missy at some point, and they end up chucking food at each other and shit. And so when she goes to leave, Lila ends up tripping and she twists her ankle, and now she gotta go to the hospital. Next chapter, and we're back in Bethy's POV, and her and Harold are taking Lila to the hospital. And this is where we find out why Lila is so mad at Missy. So it turns out Missy actually got Lila a job as like an intern, I think, or some kind of assistant, secondary assistant to the editor. And she tells Bethy that the editor was like sexually harassing her and stuff. And she never told Missy because she didn't want Missy to lose her job. She didn't want to make waves. So she just left silently without saying anything. And apparently during that fight was the first time that she told Missy. And when we hear Missy's side of the story, Joe perceives it as Missy saying that Lila got exactly what she asked for because of the way that she carried herself, which was kind of off-putting. I don't think she meant it like that, but that's what Joe was thinking. And while all the girls are at the hospital, Joe finally has them all in one room, and she tells them that your mama has cancer, okay? Babies, I'm sick. And that's the end of the chapter. All right, final stretch of the book. It is part 7. So we're in Joe's POV in the year 2016. Joe is about to come to the end of the line, and we get a glimpse of her reminiscing about her life. And also during this time, she is witnessing the 2016 election. And to Joe, this feels like a full circle moment because she was alive during the time where women's liberation was a big deal. And that was something that she had to fight for, especially her being a part of the LGBTQ, okay? And she hates the other guy, as she fucking should. Come on, queen. And for her last days here on this earth, she requests that she, you know, go to Blue Hill Farm and be surrounded by her family. And she encourages her daughters, you know, in her last moments of life to, like, fight for what's theirs and, like, you know, be strong. Kim goes back to work because she realizes that, hey, I can be a businesswoman and a mother. I don't gotta pick, I can be both. And then she also encourages Missy, and then Missy ends up leaving her publishing house in order to stand in solidarity with her sister and other victims of her boss, because he had a whole history of doing that to assistants, and he got taken down. So she left the company. And then Lila tells Joe that she's pregnant, and she's like, Mom, I know I wasn't the best daughter, but now that I'm pregnant and I'm keeping this baby, I'm going to be a great mother for the sake of you. And I'm like, I think you should be a great mother, like, just because that's what you're supposed to do. But I get the sentiment. I get you. I get that. And Jo makes her grand exit, and she places herself in a world where she was young again, where May is there and Frida's there. She's a little girl, where her mother, you know, is understanding of her, and finally where her baby sister Bethy is waiting for her to tell a bedtime story. And that is the end of Jo's storyline. May she rest in ever-loving peace. I was legitimately ugly crying at this part. So now we're coming to a close at the end of the book, and now the year is 2022 and it's in Bethy's POV. I'm just gonna read this. Just read the end of the book because it's only like 2 pages, so I'm gonna read it. What's the name of this place? Tim asked Bethy, taking his fingers out of his mouth long enough to ask the question, then popping them right back in. Tiny Tim, Lila called him, even though he wasn't tiny anymore and was getting too big to be carried. Although he would still shout, "God bless us everyone," in his best Cockney accent if his mama asked him nicely. "This is Michigan," said his big cousin Flora. Flora put her hands on his shoulders and turned him to face the red brick house on Alhambra Street. "I go to college here." "Right here?" Tim regarded the house dubiously. "Not right here," said Flora. "Remember what I told you? I go to college in Ann Arbor, where my grandma went. This is Detroit, where Aunt Bethy and my grandma grew up." Tim gave the house a moment of consideration. Bethy wondered how it would look to him. Just a house with a pointy triangle-shaped roof and a white aluminum awning. Down the street was a house he'd probably like better. Yellow with green shutters like the colors of the Frog and Toad Are Friends. Frog and Toad Are Friends was his favorite book. They'd all read it to him 100 times. "Not this again," Lila would say, but she'd read it, patient as ever, as kind and doting a mother as Jo could have ever hoped. "Did you live here?" Tim asked Lila. Lila shook her head. Her long dangling earrings chimed. The earrings used to belong to Bethy, but she'd given them all to Lila. Bell-bottom jeans and soft velvet scarves. Her traveling bag made of colorful squares of fabric that she'd bought in India. "No," Lila said. "Aunt Bethy lived here, and my mom." "Your mom was my grandma," Tim said. "Only she died." "She did," said Lila, as Kim sniffled and Missy looked away. "But she would have loved you very much." Tim nodded. Of course he knew that Jo would have loved him, Bethy thought. Everyone loved Tim. Harold loved Tim, and Sharon and her kids and grandkids loved him. Everyone who worked at Blue Hill Farm treated him like a beloved mascot, making him nut butter and jam sandwiches, slipping him squares of chocolate, giving him piggyback rides. "Do you miss her?" Tim asked. In a choked-sounding voice, Lila said, "I wasn't always the best kid. I wish she'd known me now." "Oh, honey," Bethy said, "you were fine." Lila made a noise somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and Kim patted her sister's back, and Missy took her hand. "Are we going to get ice cream?" Tim asked. "I can take him," Flora volunteered, "if you guys want to stay." "No," said Bethy. She pulled her phone out of her bag, aimed it, and took a few pictures of the house that she and Jo had been so eager to escape, so certain their lives would be bigger and better. Tim was looking at her carefully. "Are you crying, Aunt Bethy?" Bethy shook her head. "Just remembering," she said. She watched as Lila lifted her son in her arms. Together they walked back down the street to where the cars were waiting. That was a good ending. I thought that was a very good, fitting, clean ending. And that is the book. That is Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. So now that we have talked about the entire plot, I really want to talk about some themes and some commentary like I always do. So the commentary on womanhood is very obvious and prevalent in this book. I feel as though womanhood is the most beautiful thing and the most painful thing that a woman can experience. There are highs and lows with it, and we see that shown through Jo and Bethy. I feel like we saw the grittier parts of womanhood, you know, being that they grew up in the 50s and the 60s. Bethy used her womanhood and femininity to breeze by, you know, in society, and Jo used hers to buck up against societal norms in the spaces that she was occupying. To me, Jo and Bethy represented different faces of womanhood and femininity. Jo represented the warrior and the protector that, you know, can be found in a woman. We see it the most when she's doing her big sister duties, and also a lot more when she's like on the younger side. Bethy is that traditional woman in the sense of, you know, beauty is her superpower, and learning how a woman handles things her way instead of being guided by a man. And when they switch, like when they have like that big switch, personality switch, the personas kind of bleed in. So the commentary on the LGBTQIA plus community, good God. We really don't get to see like the other letters represented. We only really see the L, right? And we are witnessing Jo's struggles like firsthand as a lesbian going through the 60s, 70s, and a little bit of the 80s. As if she didn't have to deal with enough, you know, being discriminated against because she is Jewish. I felt like this was being shown as Jo is the problem, and I didn't appreciate that. The book made it seem like she was a home wrecker, or she was like corrupting the people that she was around, and I was like, ah! The LGBTQ plus being represented in media, they always seem to be like the home wreckers, or like the people that are corrupting people who are supposed to be straight or whatever. And that's what I felt what was going on in this, you know? And I hate when books do that to these types of characters, you know, supposed to be representative of the community. And I know it had something to do with the fact that Jo could not be who she wanted to be due to the time that she was living in. And the queer baiting from both Lynette and initially Shelley, like, why are you so mad because you don't know who you are and Jo knows exactly who the hell she is? And I cannot fully speak on this because I'm just an ally doing my very best, okay? So now it is time for my favorite part of reading Rouge, and that is the Dreamcast. Now, I'm gonna be honest, this isn't my best work because there are so many characters in this book, and I was like, I don't want my brain to go like overheat and stuff because this is insane. But I really only casted Jo and Bethy, but I casted like young and older versions of them, so I'll go through those. And I tried my best to find actresses that are actually Jewish that could resemble like Jo or Bethy in real life, so bear with me. So young adult Jo, like I would say high school senior to like college Jo, I would choose, what's her name? Sophia Lillis. She played Beverly in It. I think she would be a great younger Jo. And then for adult Jo, I feel Elizabeth Berkley would be great. I want to see her in a lesbian role. She kind of was in a sapphic role back then. If you know, you know. Now for young adult Bethy, don't come for me. Don't come for me. There is only one reason why I chose this actress. For young adult Bethy, I would put up Millie Bobby Brown because she looks like a younger version of the actress I chose for adult Bethy. Now adult Bethy, I would choose Natalie Portman. I feel like she can give what needs to be given for Bethy in that you know, that period in her life. So yeah, that's the only reason why I chose Millie Bobby Brown. Well, I guess it's Millie Bobby Brown Bon Jovi now because she is married, so excuse me. There were some gaps because I couldn't think. My brain went into overdrive. And then like for young Sarah, like a younger Sarah, I chose Sarah Silverman. How original is that? I don't know. But she looks young enough to like portray a younger Sarah, like, you know, when the girls were like still very little. And for older Sarah, I don't know. I don't know who that would be. And then I thought about who would play Shelley. Could not come to a conclusion on who could play Shelley. But I did think that Rowan Blanchard would be a great young Shelley. I feel like she could give off that rich, type B, impulsive 60s mod girl. Like, no problem at all. But yeah, that was my dream cast. I know it wasn't as exciting as all the other ones in the past, but there were so many characters. You had Jo and her kids, and you had to consider all the side characters that came in through this book that I didn't even mention. This book was like very reminiscent in the style of Forrest Gump. They were growing up through these major, you know, occurrences in history and in time. So you had a lot to factor in with the different time periods, them growing up. It was a lot. And I also think that's why, on a side note, why I like this book so much, because Forrest Gump is one of my favorite movies. I like how it, you know, shows him growing up through all these major events in life. And it has that same structure to this. It has the same exact structure to this. And not only that, the story was just so enticing and gravitational to me. Now, I can't relate to much being a black woman in the 21st century, but I could relate to what these women were feeling, especially when they had doubts or they went through something traumatic, and just feeling that connection, just being a woman in general. So yes, the only grievance I have with this book is how fast it went. Now, granted, this is 464 pages long, which is plenty, but that first part alone by itself, goddamn. But all around, I think it's a very compelling story, so I like this. I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. But trigger warning to those, you know, remember I put that trigger warning up at the beginning of the video. If any of those things are gonna trigger you or bring up bad stuff for you, I do not recommend this book. But if you're gonna be okay with all that, go ahead and put this on the reading list. And it's not gonna be for everyone, because some books are not for everybody, but I like this. So yes, that is Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. Am I saying it right? I don't think it's Weiner. Maybe it is Weiner. I'm gonna say Weiner. Jennifer Weiner. Thank you. And here's my look. I wasn't satisfied with it until I let my hair down. I think my hair is really pulling the makeup together, because I went through a rough time. I have never changed my makeup this much during a reading Rouge, but here we are. This is the final look. So that concludes our video for today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. And if you made it to the end of this very long video, comment a tulip emoji and subscribe if you want to. I'll see y'all on the next go round. Okay, bye.